former three-time world title challenger. Was he a three-time world title challenger, Chris Arreola? He challenged Vitaly Klitschko, Wilder, obviously, and Stavern. Yeah, so I think he's a three-time world title challenger. Former three-time world title challenger Chris Arreola is backing his countryman to knock Joshua out. He says, Wilder by knockout, and I'm telling you because personally I love a man who has a killer instinct. And he has that. He has that effing attitude. If he hurts you, he's going to take you out, because why is he going to pussyfoot around? To me, Joshua is just too cautious out there. He's too methodical. He thinks too much. And in his last fight, I didn't think he looked that great. I didn't think he looked great at all. Wilder, we've seen how he blasted out Stavern. It gets me mad to see Stavern get beat up that bad, because he's a better fighter than that. He comes in great shape to fight me, and then he comes in something arse shape to fight a great fighter like that. How are you going to do that to yourself? Come on, man. Alright, so those are the words of Arreola, backing his countrymen. And one of the things I agree with Arreola about is Wilder's killer instinct. Wilder's got tremendous killer instinct. He's a vicious, vicious man inside the ring, and that's something I've always liked about him. He has that primal puncher's instinct, and that has rubbed some people up the wrong way. Some of the comments Wilder has made in recent months have, you know, a lot of people have classed him as tasteless and sick, dangerous, etc. But my perspective on it is the referee and the cornermen are there to make sure that the fighters don't come to any serious harm. So regardless of what the intention of a fighter is, he's just a man with boxing gloves on, right? He can't stab anyone, he can't shoot anyone, he can't bludgeon anyone over the head with a hammer. He's only got his fists and a pair of boxing gloves. So regardless of what intention he's got in his mind, it's irrelevant really, isn't it? But it just shows you the mentality of certain punchers. They've got viciousness on their mind, and Deontay Wilder is one of them kind of guys, and it is thrilling to watch somebody who has that kind of viciousness in them. And look, boxing is a brutal sport. I'm not here to be an apologist for boxing. I'm not here to tell you that it's civilized and it's this, that, and the other. No, boxing is brutal, it's primal, and I can't really defend boxing from a moral point of view, other than saying the participants get to earn money and get to build a better life for themselves and their families. I can't sit around here and tell you that it's not brutal. It is brutal. I can't sit around and tell you it's not, you know, a slightly sanitized version of the Roman Colosseum, because it is. It's a brutal, vicious, violent sport. You know, I'm not gonna lie about it and try and sugarcoat it and make it flowery. No, it's brutal stuff. And so the mentalities of a lot of the guys at the top level, especially the big punchers, the guys who rely on power, their mentalities are brutal. You know, this is something that, particularly in Britain, people are prudish about, and I can understand to an extent, but don't be shocked when fighters reveal that they have very dark intentions when they get in the ring. Yeah, there's far more of them than just Deontay Wilder. Trust me on that one. Far more of them. You know, he's just one of the ones that was honest enough to talk about it. But yeah, he's a vicious man inside the ring, brutal, and it is thrilling to watch someone with that kind of brutality. Mike Tyson was the same, a very brutal man inside the ring. He loved hurting his opponents. He had cruel and vicious intentions, which he talked about. Some people act like Mike Tyson was being metaphorical. He weren't being metaphorical. Mike Tyson was virtually a sociopath on the streets of Brooklyn and Brownsville. You know, Brownsville, Brooklyn. He was virtually a sociopath by the time he was, you know, 11, 12, 13 years old. Yeah. So the thought of KOing somebody permanently has crossed his mind on many occasions. You know, And Mike Tyson, because he had that viciousness and he was that primal force of nature, that's what made him so thrilling to watch. It was like watching a wild animal, watching Mike Tyson. You know, no disrespect, but when the bell rings and Mike Tyson flew out the corner, it was like watching someone get set about by a wild tiger or a lion or something. That's the kind of just primal ferocity that he brought to the ring. As soon as the first bell went for a Mike Tyson fight, the crowd were on their feet already, screaming, because Tyson didn't hang about. He was throwing atom bombs, nitrogen bombs from the opening bell. You didn't have to wait for the fireworks to start. The fireworks would start immediately in a Tyson fight. Now, Wilder's not quite on that level. You know, he does wait patiently quite a lot in his fights. But if he finds an opportunity in the first round, he's going to take it. You know, he don't necessarily go looking for the opportunities, but when he sees one present itself, he'll go for it. He has that puncher's mentality. So, yeah, I definitely like Wilder's mentality. In terms of, not in terms of his intention for his opponent, but in terms of the viciousness in seeking knockouts. You know, that he wants a knockout. He's not a guy who just wants to take a fight to points. His intention is to go in there and finish the fight by knockout. That's what his intention is. So that is something I like, and I like fighters in general who are like that. You know, that's why I like watching people like Kovalev or, you know, Stevenson. All these knockout artists, I prefer watching them than technical fighters. That's just my personal preference. I've always been a guy who likes knockout artists. I can appreciate the technical aspect of boxing too. You know, I was a Pernell Whitaker fan back in the days, but there's nothing like a puncher. When someone can really crack and they always go for it, like Tommy Hearns is another one of my favorite fighters. I loved watching Tommy Hearns because he was devilish. In the early rounds of a fight, he was just an absolute monster. You didn't want to get cracked by the Tommy Hearns right hand. So, yeah, I get where Arreola's coming from, just from a spectator's point of view. From, yeah, just a boxing fan point of view. Wilder is a thrilling guy to watch. As far as will he knock Joshua out, who knows, man? Let's hope the fight gets signed and we can find out. I've been back and forth about who would win Joshua Wilder, because you learn more about fighters the more you see of them, right? So the more we see of Joshua, the more we learn about him, and the better we can assess how he would do against whoever, Wilder or whatever other fighter out there. So I was thinking Wilder for a while, and then I switched over to thinking Joshua would win. Then I switched back to thinking Wilder would win. And then after the Ortiz fight, I was like, maybe Joshua would win after all. So for me, it's very close between the two of them, and I'm not sure who to pick. But if I had, you know, if I was forced, I'd probably slightly lean towards Joshua winning. But I actually think it's going to be a very cagey fight, Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua, because Anthony Joshua has the more sound fundamental boxing skills, and Wilder is very low volume when he's in there with someone who can actually box. When he's in there with a guy who's stationary and a plodder like a Berman Stavern, he'll let his hands go. But when he's in there with someone who can actually box with him at long range, Wilder tends to be very low volume. His punch output drops way down. We saw that even earlier on in his career against Kelvin Price. We saw that against Gerald Washington. We saw that against Luis Ortiz. Yeah, for the most part against Ortiz, Wilder was doing very little. He was waiting for Ortiz to overcommit, and then he was throwing a big counter and going for it. But the Ortiz fight, remember it as a good fight. It was actually quite a boring fight for long stretches because not much was happening, and it was Wilder just fencing with his left hand and just with the right hand cocked and not doing much. Once he lands something on you, yeah, Wilder goes Wilder, right? He goes country boy on you, and it gets exciting real quick. You know, he goes from 0 to 60 in a split second, 0 to 100 even in a split second. But in between that, it's all very cagey stuff. So I think Joshua Wilder is going to be a cagey fight. It may have moments of drama, but for the most part, I think it's going to be cagey. And I actually think the longer the fight goes, the better it might be for Wilder, because Joshua with those big heavy muscles, I don't think he'll be as explosive as Wilder late on. Wilder can retain that explosiveness and that speed, that adrenaline burst that he has. He can retain that late on in the fight. So I think the longer it goes, the more dangerous it's going to get for Anthony Joshua, and the more careful he's going to have to be in the second half of the fight. Wilder's shown he can end fights late. Yeah, you saw what he did to Johan Duopa. He ended that fight late. You know, you saw what he did to Artur Spilka. He ended that fight late with one punch. So I think it will be a cagey fight where Joshua's maybe outboxing Wilder, but Wilder is dangerous at any point. He has a turbo boost, let's just call it that, which Anthony Joshua also has a turbo boost, but it's nowhere near as souped up as Wilder's is. Yeah, so I don't know, it'll be a fascinating fight, which I'll love to see. Hopefully it gets signed. So anyway, let me know what you think about Chris Arreola's comments here. Is he just being patriotic? Is he just talking up the guy who already beat him? Or is this what he genuinely thinks? And how valid do you think his argument is here? He just sees Wilder being the more aggressive fighter, and that being an advantage for him going in against Joshua. Will it be an advantage, or will it actually be a disadvantage? Let me know what you think in the comments, people. It's happening. I'm out.